Hey everybody, this is Derrick Ruiz, and I'm super happy today to be interviewing Alex Rodriguez, CCIM, who is a very experienced commercial real estate broker selling triple net properties. Let me give a little background on Alex. With more than 15 years of experience in commercial real estate, Alex is the founder and managing broker of the Alexander Group. He advises clients on triple net lease retail acquisitions, buyer tenant representation, landlord sales and leasing, strategic portfolio repositioning, and asset recapitalization. Alex earned an MBA from Mississippi State University and is a graduate of CSU Los Angeles, where he majored in computer information systems. He also completed the Harvard Business School Executive Education Real Estate Management Program and has achieved the designation of CCIM Certified Commercial Investment Member. Welcome, Alex, man. Glad to see you, brother.
Hey Derek, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
All right, all right. Hey, before we get started, what exactly is a CCIM?
CCIM is a designation from the CCIM Institute, and it's basically one of the higher designations you can have in commercial real estate, Certified Commercial Investment Member. Yeah.
Got it. So you also got an MBA, so you are quite the educated real estate guy.
Yeah, you put it all together, and I can probably get a get a get
Good
a
man.
coffee from Starbucks.
Okay, so listen, let's start with some basic questions for people that may not know much about triple net property and the commercial stuff that you do. Why don't we start with what exactly is a triple net lease and how does it differ from other types of leases?
Triple Net Lease takes into account the three net charges: property taxes, uh, common area maintenance, and insurance. And those charges are transferred from the landlord to the tenant. The tenant is now responsible for all those net charges, giving the landlord, the owner, the rent as net.
So the landlord, the owner of the buildings doesn't have a lot of expenses like multifamily owners with, property taxes and insurance and stuff like that. Do triple net tenants, do they pay for repairs and maintenance?
They do. They pay for repairs and maintenance, and it all depends. Every lease, can be a little different. There's a few different types of triple net leases. The main ones are the standard variety triple net lease, in which case, yes, the tenant pays for property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and repairs, but the landlord can still be responsible for the structural portions of the premises. So the roof, load-bearing walls, foundation, that sort of thing. Then there's an absolute triple net lease, in which case the tenant is responsible for absolutely everything under the sun. The landlord has zero responsibilities under that type of lease, an absolute triple net lease. And then the other common type is a ground lease. In the ground lease, technically, the tenant is only leasing the ground from you. The building is theirs for all intents and purposes in terms of, especially in terms of taxes. Under a ground lease, the tenant gets the benefit of depreciation, typically, and the landlord doesn't. But at the same token, since they own the building for the time that they're leasing it, they're responsible for everything in regards to that building, repairs, everything. The landlord's responsible for nothing.
Got it. So, yeah, I have a buddy who's got, I think it was a CVS in, I think it was Alabama, and he had to put a roof on the property. So obviously he didn't have a absolute triple net lease.
He did not, correct, yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that you recommend? I mean, if you own a building or you buy a building, is to make sure that the tenant you put in there is on a absolute triple net lease?
1,000%, especially if you're going to own property out of state. In my opinion, that's the only way you can own property out of state and have peace of mind. You have to have an absolute triple net lease so that you have no concerns about needing to be nearby in order to get contractors out there, that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like the rule of thumb for owning residential properties residential rental properties is you don't want to be more than a half hour away from your building just because of the time, the travel time to get there in case there's an issue or whatever if you don't have a property manager. And I think it's a different concept for people that are getting into triple net commercial properties that, you know, you live in California and you can own a building in Oregon or Utah or New Jersey or whatever, and it almost doesn't matter
Definitely.
because you're not really managing the property. So I think it's a concept that I've had a couple of people look at triple net and they're like, oh, well, I want it in Southern California. I want it near my house or whatever. And I'm like, dude, there's better deals outside of California. You're not, dependent on a local location like owning a triplex or a fourplex or something like that, correct?
Absolutely. And typically when you buy out of state, because in California, your cap rates are always going to be depressed compared to other states in the nation. So you're going to be able to benefit from, 100 basis points more, 200 basis points more in terms of cap rate. And sometimes that can be like 50% difference to your NOI, which is huge.
Right.
And the other
And
thing is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
go no, go ahead.
The other thing is that I found that my experience and my client's experience, the irony is you actually end up having more control over a property that you own out of state than a property that you have in your same neck of the woods.
Yeah,
You know,
explain that.
you could, let's say, you live at point A, you work at point C, and you have a building at point B. So you drive back there every single day. You see it every day. There's no graffiti outside. It looks like it's well maintained. There's no homeless issue. So it gives you this false sense of security that everything's fine. But when's the last time you actually went on the premises? When's the last time you went into the building? Maybe you did go in the building a week ago, a month ago. When's the last time you went on the roof to inspect the roof? When's the last time you had the mechanical checked, the electrical, the plumbing? Probably most people's answer is going to be years. So you have no idea what's going on inside that building. Whereas opposed to if you own a property that's, in Florida, in Texas, in Tennessee, you can't drive there every day. You can't fly there every month. So you have to put some procedures in place to make sure that at least once a year it gets inspected properly. And you have a local inspector, you have a relationship with a local inspector. They go out there, they charge anywhere between 800 and about 1200 one time. They give a report, 70-page report with pictures, with an executive summary up front, letting you know what needs to be taken care of now and what needs to be taken care of, relatively soon to prevent issues like deferred maintenance. And then you take that report, you give it to the property manager of CVS or Dollar General or Walgreens or, whoever, McDonald's. They take care of whatever needs to be done. They come back to you. You send your guy back out there, your building inspector, private building inspector. He checks everything off. Peace of mind, you're done once a year. And you have more control over that property that's 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 miles away than you do of the property that's 1 mile away.
Just because it's close, you don't bother getting inspectors or something? Is that what your
Well,
experience?
you just get this false sense of security. You see it and you're like, well, I don't need to spend, a few $100 or $1,000 to have it inspected. It looks fine. And it happens, we're guilty of it ourselves. You see that. I see that happening time and time again.
Got it. So there's inspectors that specialize in triple net properties that,
Yes. Yeah.
you can hire to go out, and that sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
That's definitely the way to go.
now you own triple net and your family owns triple net. So you guys have been in the triple net business for how long?
We started moving, transitioning from apartment buildings to triple net buildings in about 2016. So it's
Oh,
about,
really? That recent, huh?
yeah, not
And
that
why
long.
did you do why did you do that? Why did your family do that?
We had a couple of triple net properties, and we had a couple of, we had a couple of retail properties, and we had a couple of apartment buildings, and we just realized that there was just so much more, you got so much more bang for your buck in a triple net property, especially out of state, and so much less stress and headaches. And we were lucky because we got out 2016, and what happened a few years later? COVID.
Yeah.
If we had still owned those apartment buildings during COVID, that would have been a nightmare because, I don't have to tell a lot of multifamily apartment building owners they couldn't charge rent for a long time. They couldn't increase rents. So they were stuck, but they
They
still had to
couldn't
pay their
evict. They
mortgage.
couldn't evict either.
They couldn't evict. They lost control of their property. That's the most, and that's key.
Wow.
One thing is a financial thing. Another thing is that you lost control of your property. Someone else owns it, and it almost feels that way. But if they had mortgages, they still had to pay those mortgages. They still had to pay property taxes. They still had to pay insurance. They still had to maintain the property. They still had to keep all the electrical and the plumbing, everything. But they couldn't collect rents, and it's extremely unfair. And we're so lucky, pure luck, that we got out of the game before that happened.
What did you guys end up doing exchanges into?
There was a pharmacy in Dalton, Georgia, that we picked up, and that was a Rite Aid at the time that ended up becoming a Walgreens.
Got it.
And that was a really good deal for us. And you may have never heard of Dalton, Georgia, but it's the carpeting capital of the world. It's just about half an hour away from Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's a real good, solid sized town. We got a few others. We have a Dollar General in Florida. We got a Rite Aid in Pennsylvania, and a Citizens Bank in Ohio.
Got
And
it.
those are the best investments we've ever made.
Yeah, so you basically have the whole country to look at. I mean, you can go shopping around the whole country for good deals,
Yeah,
right?
I told the old man we have properties in all four corners of the U.S. So the East Coast, the West Coast, the South, the Midwest, and even the Northeast. So yeah.
Right. Are you kind of in charge of you know, in charge of not managing these properties, but overseeing everything?
Yeah, and the good thing is that there's not a lot to oversee with these absolute triple net deals. It's basically mailbox money that comes in, and the most important thing is whether you want to have it inspected once a year. Send somebody out, get inspected, so you have an idea of what needs to be done, and everything's on the tenant. And as long as you have a solid tenant that's respectable, and it's one of these Fortune 500 company with $1 billion financial statement, that not a mom and pop, that could go belly up, then you're in good shape.
Well, so let's talk about the due diligence process, how that differs from like a residential multifamily property. So let's say that you get under contract with a Rite Aid or Walgreens or whatever. What's the due diligence process for a triple net property?
Pretty straightforward. You want to do your inspection of the property because you need to. You get your survey done. You get the environmentals, if the environmentals are already done, if they're fairly recent. It depends whether you need to do a phase two. You want to check the lease. The lease is very important. Most of the time, I'd say 99% of the time, something's advertised as a triple net lease or an absolute triple net lease. It is what it is, but the devil's in the details.
Right.
So, you want to have an attorney take a look at it and make sure that there's no caveats and that they are, in fact, responsible, the tenant, for everything under the sun. So that's key.
Are lawyers involved in these transactions generally?
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, you don't have to, but I think it's smart. Whatever you pay an attorney, you amortize it over the 20-year deal, the 10, 15, you're talking, pennies a week. And that's that. I think it's worth it for the peace of mind.
Right. And you're doing a physical building inspection as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Got it. Now, I know that the length of the remaining lease is important.
Yes.
Obviously, the financial qualifications of the tenant is important.
Yeah.
And so explain like lease lengths and how they affect the value of the property and what you want to do and what you don't want to do. I mean, you don't want to buy a property that has 3 years remaining on its lease, do you?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. You want the longer the term, the better. You want to see something with 10 years of term, 15 years of term. Usually you see between 10 and 15. Sometimes you see 20, but mostly you see 10, 15 years of term. The longer the lease, the more value there is going to be for the building. Can you find a Walgreens at a 9 cap, a 9% return? Yeah, but it's going to have like, a year of term left on there. And you don't
And
know
there's
what's going to
no
happen next year.
and there's no guarantee that Walgreens is going to re-up.
There's no guarantee. So you want something with, 10, 15 years of term. So you have that runway.
Yeah, my buddy who had to put the roof on his CVS, well, CVS, wanted like a 30% discount on the existing lease. And my guy said no, and so they're gone. And so now he's putting in an AutoZone. But he says those guys are real bastards as far as the terms of the lease and the price and everything. But he did get him in there, but his broker said, it's about the best we can do at the moment.
Yeah, it's a different landscape now with pharmacies. It's just becoming a bit of a different animal. Now the only pharmacy left out there with that's actually investment grade is CVS, and those deals can be interesting. CVS,
Because they think they have leverage.
yes, they think they have leverage. They think they're the only, they might be the only pharmacy game in town, and they are in terms of investment grade. But there's a
Can,
lot of other different retailers out there that you can own. It doesn't have to be a pharmacy.
can you talk about investment grades and so the audience knows what you're talking about and
Yeah,
ratings and stuff?
we all know of the credit agencies, Moody's, Standard and Poor's, who assign credit ratings to companies, and they have different ratings. There's triple A rated, double A, single A, A minus, and it goes down. And Standard and Poor's seems to be what most people use. The lowest form of investment grade is triple B minus. So anything considered triple B minus or above is considered investment grade. You typically you don't have to worry about them going bankrupt. Banks will tend to give you more favorable financing on a mortgage that you might need to buy one, that sort of thing. So if you're looking at a tenant that's investment grade, you have a reasonable assurance that they're going to be around for a while. You don't have to worry about them, closing up shop in the next year or two.
Yeah. I guess that the difference between like commercial and multifamily is that, you know, commercial's like steady income
Yeah.
and you shouldn't have any income stream interruptions or anything because it's a big
No.
corporate tenant and they got their set month that they're going to mail you every month or wire into your account. Multifamily, um, you can create, and to continue on with that, your commercial, when you buy a commercial property, it's not going to really jump up in value over time. Like, let's say you buy a building for 5 million, and it's got a six cap, seven cap, and it's going to bump up every year for whatever amount. But at the end of the 10-year period, the building is just going to be worth whatever the current rents are at a cap rate. Whereas
Yeah.
a multifamily, you could buy 10 units and maybe in 10 years, five of the tenants have moved out and now you've bumped the rents up to market value. You've created a lot more value in that multifamily building, but there's a lot more ups and downs. You might have had to spend 50,000 to get a tenant out, or you had to do a lot of repairs or something like that. So I
Yeah,
guess.
you hear a lot nowadays about passive income,
Mhm.
right? And I think anyone who's ever owned a multifamily apartment building will tell you there's nothing passive about owning and managing an apartment building. It's
Good
very
point.
management
Good
intensive.
point.
Okay, it's very active. It's not passive. You got to manage however many tenants you have. You have to there's a lot of accounts payable and accounts receivable involved and evictions and God knows what. And now you got to worry about the government because they did it once. If they did it once, it makes it easy for them to do it again. They'll come in and put more restrictions, and who knows when the next time they'll tell you that you're not allowed to collect rents anymore, you
Yeah.
know? And that doesn't happen in the commercial world,
Yeah. Well, especially in California.
especially in
And
California.
then you have rent control and you've got Prop 33 and all these rent control rules, regulations. It seems like every city is going to be going towards rent control. I just heard Burbank is going to impose rent control, and I think Pasadena already has, Inglewood, Culver City, all the cities that used to be non-rent control are all going to rent control. So
And these laws are trying to pass. They're making it seem like every landlord is BlackRock, and they're not. You got a lot of landlords who've been, their nest egg is this building, and they've worked their entire lives to do this, and they have a mortgage to pay, or they're the little guy too,
Right.
and it's not easy for them.
And so, are most of your customers 1031 exchangers, or do you have some customers that say, I got a chunk of money, I want to buy a triple net property, Alice, can you help me?
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. Some people are sitting on some cash, but most people have to move around, properties. They have to relocate some assets. So they'll have maybe an apartment building, or they'll have maybe, two or three rental homes, because rental homes factor into that too. A like kind of change. If you have a single family dwelling in California, that's worth, $1 million, and you're renting that out, you can take that rental and do a 1031 exchange and buy a pharmacy or a bank or a McDonald's or whatever it is, because it qualifies for that like kind exchange. Just because it's a house doesn't mean you can't do that. So you might have three rental homes, and you can sell those rental homes and 1031 exchange into an absolute triple net property.
Right. And how does financing work with triple net properties?
There's lenders all over the U.S. There's a lot of lenders that specialize in that sort of thing. Sometimes they're specific to the state. Sometimes they're just, they can handle anything across the U.S. And I have pretty good relationships with a lot of those lenders and brokers, and we can usually help people get done what they need done. Yeah.
What's the typical down payment required for, something like a bank or AutoZone or McDonald's or something, is it going to be a loan to value thing? Is it going to be based on the NOI or what?
It can be anywhere from uh, 70% loan to value to, 40% loan. It can vary. It just depends on the deal, and yeah,
Do
it
they
can vary.
do they look at the DCR, debt coverage ratio, like in multifamily?
They look at everything. Yeah.
Got it. And I mean, do they really scrutinize the buyer's credit and all that stuff too?
In those deals, it's mostly the underwriting. Most of it is involved with the tenant and the property. The stronger the tenant, the more credit worthy they are, the better their credit rating in terms of being investment grade, the better chances you have of getting that loan, through and getting a more favorable interest rate.
Got it. Okay. So they're not like really scrutinizing the buyer like somebody buying a house.
They would, but it's not as much as the property. I mean, some people might vary with that, but in my experience, it's been mostly about the property.
Right. What do you see as the overall market trends right now in the commercial triple net world? I mean, what are you seeing happening out there with, the higher interest rates and the softer economy and the high inflation? I mean, what's your overall take on the market right now?
No one's got a crystal ball, but you know how it is. Interest rates go up, cap rates have to go up to meet it, or else it just doesn't pencil out, right? So most people seem to agree that we're kind of at the top of that, and now interest rates are going to start going down. So definitely gonna factor into the equation.
Yeah. What about the news that I read the other day about, is it Walgreens that were closing a bunch of stores?
Yeah,
Like,
Walgreens.
how many did they close?
I what was the number? I think it was like 1,000 or something like that. They were going to close, and they're not closing it from one day to the next. These are leases that are, getting close to the end of their term.
Right.
They just can't decide they're going to close and say, oh, we're closing. Well, no, they have a corporate guarantee. If they sign for 10 years, they have to honor that 10 years of paying rent, no matter what. Um, Unless they go bankrupt, and that's a different story. And no one's talking about Walgreens going bankrupt. They're just deciding that they're closing stores that are less profitable, just to kind of reposition, yeah, their finances.
So basically, they're just not renewing leases on these properties.
Correct.
They're not going to a landlord that's got 7 years left on his lease and say, "Hey, we're bailing out of here."
No, no, no. They cannot do that. They
Because that's
cannot.
what it. I mean, the news kind of makes it sound doomy and gloomy, you know.
No, no, they can't do that. But you look at that, and then for the same thing, you'll find other stores are open. You know, yeah. It just there's always stores opening and closing. Sometimes it you hit the news, other times it doesn't. You know, in any given year, Walgreens will close 200 stores, but they'll open a bunch of stores too. Now it just happens to be they're closing more than they're opening.
Okay, got it. So who um I guess you kind of covered this, but I guess a property owner, a triple net property owner, doesn't really have to be involved in day-to-day operations of the property or anything, right? I mean, I'm not saying they can go to sleep, but as long as they're doing their inspections, um,
I'll give you an example of how hands off it is.
okay.
I helped a client buy a Dollar General in Houston, Texas, a few years ago. I think it was 2018. Don't quote me. About 6 months into that purchase, he's getting rent every month like clockwork. 6 months into it, Hurricane, I forget what her name was, comes through and dumps 6 feet of water into the store.
Was
So
that
there's six
Katrina?
feet of water into the store.
Was that Katrina?
I forget what it was.
Okay, anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. And he was freaking out. And I said, don't worry, there's nothing to freak out about. Everything's fine. He says, well, is the store open? I said, I don't know if it's open. It doesn't matter. I'll find out for you, but it doesn't matter if it's open or not. This is their problem, not ours. But do I have to call the insurance? You don't have to call anybody. That's all on them.
Dang.
And I called the store and they were definitely, closed. They ended up opening about, I think, 4 months later. And during the interim, my guy got rent every month like clockwork without fail. He didn't have to make a single phone call to the insurance company. He didn't have to fly out there. He didn't have to do anything. It was all on Dollar General to remediate the building, get it back to new, open up, keep operating, and during the interim, keep paying the landlord as they're responsible because it's an absolute triple net lease and the landlord is responsible for nothing. That's how hands off this is.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You would think that he'd be calling an insurance company and stuff, but did he even have insurance on the property or did they have the insurance
No,
policy?
they have insurance. They
Yeah.
have insurance and he's noted as additionally insured, so he's covered 100% liability and property. He has nothing to worry about.
I think I bet experienced triple net property owners probably laugh at us multifamily owners because it's such an easier gig than
You know, it, it
multifamily.
it's not about laughing. It's just about, there's nothing wrong with multifamily, and it's gotten investors to where they are, and it's been good to them. And I think maybe a lot of them they've probably thought about owning something. They probably drive by you know a Dollar General or a Walgreens or a McDonald's, and they think they can't own that, or if they do own it, they're involved in the business. No, they can own it. It's just it's not what they're used to. It's not their wheelhouse. So they just need someone to explain to them, this is how it's done. And once they realize how different it is, my clients that have owned apartment buildings and now switch triple net, they will never go back. Not only that, they will never buy again in California.
Yeah.
They'd much rather buy out of state.
Yeah.
I've
I
got
know.
clients who sold properties at a 4 cap and then bought a triple net property at a 6 cap. That's a 50% difference to your bottom line, 50% more to your bottom line NOI. I mean, how can you beat that? Where can you get that? Right?
Yeah, and if you own a building at a four cap, it's not even really a four cap because you're going to have, capital expenditures. It's going to need a roof. It's going to need a sewer line. It's going to need this
That,
and that. So
that's
that
the other thing. You
4%.
can't plan. You don't know how much you're gonna. You're trying to plan for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You can't do that owning an apartment building because you don't know what hidden expenses are going to pop up next year. You're going to need a new roof. Maybe you're going to have to change, half of the pipes in the building from galvanized to copper. Maybe you got to change the whole thing. So you really can't plan out financially. With an absolute triple net, you can, because you know exactly how much is coming in next year, the year after that. You know your tax liability. You have everything at your disposal to make the plans you need to. But with multifamily and other stuff, it's very difficult.
How do you find properties for clients when they need you to help them find a building? Are you just
There's a
putting
lot of different ways. You know, there's
CoStar,
the
Net, or
usual
whatever?
suspects online, the websites, and then you have personal relationships that I've made over the last 15 plus years with brokers across the US, you know, that I can give them a call. And sometimes they got stuff that's under the radar. They got stuff that's about to come online that hasn't hit the market yet. They let me know about it. We've done a few transactions together. They know I can close, so they'll give me that info and I can get my clients some information before it hits the general market.
Right, right. And do you have no problem selling properties in other states, right? I guess for commercial type properties, you don't have to have a like if you're selling a property in Colorado, you don't need a Colorado broker's license, right?
Depends. If you're listing a property, most of the times you do, and there's ways to do that, and that's not difficult. If you're a California broker, most of the time you can do everything from California. California has no problem with you doing transactions out of state.
Okay, and the other state doesn't have any problems either, right?
Some do, some don't.
Yeah. And is there a standard purchase agreement that you guys use? Is it it's not going to be state specific, right?
It depends, and mostly that depends on the seller, what the seller's comfortable with. They might want to use a state form. They might want to use their own paper that their attorney drafted. You know, it's usually the seller's decision, and it just depends on the seller what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I guess that's why it's important to have an attorney look over the lease because if you're using a custom lease from Marcus or Millichap or CB Richard Ellis or something, and they have their own proprietary contracts, you're not familiar with them. So, I mean, you can read them and understand them, but it's probably best to have an attorney.
And there might be some provisions that are perfectly legal in one state, but they're not allowed in another state. So yeah, you want to have someone look at it who knows who's done this before and knows what they're doing.
Got it. Yeah, sometimes I think to myself, man, I kind of wish I would have become a commercial triple net broker, as opposed to multifamily and residential and stuff, because
You're doing just fine. Who would I call when I need help with multifamily if you're
I
not
know
around? Come on, man.
that's
Don't
true.
go
That's true.
anywhere, please.
Yeah, yeah, we did a deal, by the way. We did Alex and I did a deal. He had a client that had 5 units in North Hollywood, and he brought me into the deal to help list it, and we sold it. And didn't he do an exchange on that?
Yeah, yeah.
What, okay, so we sold a fiveplex in North Hollywood about a year and a half ago, and then he did a 1031. What did you end up getting him?
I think that one was a Walgreens in Mesa, Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's been great for him.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. No more tenants, no more rent control.
No, he's also got help him get a Family Dollar in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Right, right.
Yeah. So he's good.
Well,
He's happy.
maybe someday we'll get that other building going and he'll do another 1031 in a
God
commercial.
willing, he's got to be ready to move on that thing.
Either
He
that
calls
or
me once in a while. He'll be ready eventually.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, Alex, this was fantastic. I really appreciate your time, and I think you provided some really, really good information for the audience watching this video. You're very, very knowledgeable. You're very, very accomplished, and you and your family own triple net property. So I couldn't think of a better person to refer my clients to. And if anybody's watching this video needs help with triple net commercial all over the country, please call Alex. I'll be posting your contact information at the end of this video so people can get a hold of you.
I appreciate you reaching out. I love talking shop whenever I have the time. Thank you so much.
All right, brother. We'll be in touch.
All
Take
right,
care.
take care, man.